better lives, better conditions to migrate to the north. And so you found that places like Cleveland and surprisingly Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., that is endearingly called Chocolate City, all these other urban areas, or in New York and Harlem, all of these urban areas people moved to try to have better jobs in industrialized type of a country at this time. And as they moved there, they were hoping for a better life. And this is one of the primary reasons for moving from the south to the north. And when they went into these particular areas that became, as time went on, very much a part of urban problems. Economics became disastrous. This groups of people that migrated there came there with high hopes and in many instances prospered and did a lot better, but they had low-skilled types of jobs that they could finish a job and then go right out of that job and take on another one. So things were better. And I would also like to say during this time period of 1916 to say that first migration period to 1930, if we think about World War I and World War II, why there was a need there for people to build railroads because of the war, to build military equipment. So therefore industries evolved and there was a need for large numbers of people to work in those industries. So this workforce that moved there came there for those types of reasons. But on a more intellectual level, it is very interesting to understand because of that great migration, something by the name of the Harlem Renaissance emerged. And during this time period, you had people like Zora Neale Hurston, the great Duke Ellington, Count Basie, just many other literary scholars at that time, the great W.B. Du Bois, and Marcus Garvey, all of those people in this central area from that great migration emerged that really contributed to the American culture as well as the world culture. But now, given that, you had World War I, World War II, large concentrations of people moving from the south to the north, with an increase of millions by this time that have moved into urban areas. And after they got there and worked very hard, you find that discrimination was even there in the north, as they very much experienced sometimes in the south. People were disrespecting, weren't used to that group of people moving in, that group of people taking jobs that others felt that they should have. And when you think about today's political climate, some of the same issues are very much present with immigration of other people coming into the country, or with groups of people still competing for jobs and within the workforce. But this was a great migration that took place in that particular time period from 1916, say, to 1930, with large concentrations of African Americans moving. And then we can look at what we might refer to as a second wave of that same migration that went on from up until the 1960s through the 1970s. Again, with people moving from the south to the north in large population numbers. And that statistics just increased and people were moving for a better way of life and to also to prosper and to move away from a very depressed, offensive, racist society.
And the violent side, a very violent side at the time.
Yes.
Well, since we're into a voting season now, how did African Americans participate in the politics once they got out of the South? Make some statements.
Well, that's a very interesting concept because historically, Africans who had an opportunity to vote would have probably voted in the Republican Party at that particular time. But then there was a transition that took place, you know, after World War I, World War II, and things started to change, that people started to move toward a more democratic type of voting. And those types of possibilities as they move to the north lean in that direction. And I think that's why today you will find large numbers of people who are concentrated in urban areas will vote on a Democratic ticket because they feel that their policies were geared toward them more so than what a more conservative Republican Party would. So they actually were indeed the Democratic Party. But they were a force to be reckoned with, and people had to go in, and many people started to merge into education, become Congress people out of those urban areas, and very politically motivated within that urban setting. But going back to that whole notion of them moving there, we would like to try to say that when we look at the culture of those concentrated urban areas, a lot of deviance started to emerge. Why? Because the economics within those particular cities did not allow people to continue, as we moved into a technological age, to have the same jobs that they had when they went there in an earlier time period of 1916 to the 1930s, or why they went there in the 50s and 60s in large proportions. So now we see pockets of cultural poverty within those same urban settings that would be disproportionate of African Americans in that area. So education, economics, school systems, family breakup, all of those characteristics that would lead toward high crime rates are certainly characteristics of a large number of the urban areas. And then this become a very huge problem within the United States. So when we look at Chicago and look at other urban areas, we see homicide rates are so high. It's not that it's the people, but it's the social environment of living in the culture of poverty and those characteristics that it has manifested that will cause that to happen.
Okay, and we're going to take a short commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.
In the South because of the early migration are now moving back to the South.
And in the meanwhile, say something about the system of separation and segregation.
Oh, yes, yes.
In the South, it was clear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's the law, Ferguson.
That's right.
But in the North, it was not always that way, and how that might have contributed. The separation of, only black folks here. And do something like that.
Too.
Because I think that would sort of round out this
it
excellent information. You've got them there.
That's right.
And they're working, and they're going to war and everything else, and et cetera. But while they're there, everything is not equal in a real sense. And this is where the suffrage plays a very, very important part. And some of the things that we ought to be thinking about today.
That's right.
In terms of trying to deal with this politics. Okay, but that's essentially, we'll have 10 minutes.
Okay,
so anything that you want to throw within the framework of making people understand the violence, brutality, et cetera, in the northern parts of it, sociologically.
Okay,
just throw it at us. You see.
Okay.
I'm trying to know that lady's name. It starts with an N. She did this tremendous study on Africans, the migration of black folks to the northern parts of the United States was on all of the. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. EKSanford3.